The campfire crackled, sending sparks into the ink-black sky. 3 friends, Mia, Jason, and Lauren, sat on worn logs arranged in a loose circle. The forest stretched endlessly around them, a living wall of shadow and sound. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, its cry sharp and lonely. "Okay, one more ghost story, and then I'm done," Lauren said, pulling her jacket tighter. "It's getting cold." Jason rolled his eyes. "Come on. We've only been out here for an hour. Feels longer." Lauren glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes darted into the trees, as if something unseen had stirred. "This place, it's too quiet." Mia laughed softly. "You wanted to come camping." Lauren didn't respond. Instead, she reached for her flashlight and clicked it on, pointing the beam into the undergrowth. The light sliced through the darkness, but it revealed only a tangle of bushes and skeletal trees. "Relax," Jason said. "There's nothing out there." "Don't say that," Lauren muttered. "It's like inviting something to prove you wrong." Jason smirked and leaned forward, letting the firelight catch on his face. "What if it's already here?" Mia threw a twig at him. "Stop being an idiot." Lauren stood abruptly. "I'm going to the tent." She didn't wait for a response, disappearing into the shadows beyond the firelight. The zipper of her tent scraped open and shut, leaving Mia and Jason alone. "She's jumpy tonight," Mia said, poking the fire with a stick. Jason shrugged. "She's always like this. Can't handle the dark." Mia frowned. "Don't be mean." Jason held up his hands in mock surrender. Fine. I'll behave." A low rustling interrupted their conversation. Both turned their heads toward the sound. It came from the forest, faint but steady, like something moving through the underbrush. "Probably a raccoon," Jason said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. Mia didn't respond. She was staring into the darkness, her eyes narrowed. "That doesn't sound like a raccoon." The rustling stopped. Silence fell, thick and oppressive. Even the chirping of crickets had ceased. "Hello?" Jason called, his voice unnaturally loud. The forest swallowed the word, offering no echo, no response. Mia stood, her movements slow and deliberate. "We should check on Lauren." Jason hesitated, but eventually nodded. They crossed the campsite together, their flashlights cutting through the void. Mia reached Lauren's tent first and knelt to unzip it. "Lauren, are you okay?" The tent was empty. Inside, Lauren's sleeping bag lay undisturbed, her backpack neatly placed in the corner. "Where is she?" Mia asked, her voice tight. Jason's flashlight beam swept the area. "She probably went to pee. Let's give her a minute." Mia didn't look convinced, but she nodded. They returned to the fire and sat in uneasy silence. Minutes passed. The forest remained still, the air growing colder with each breath. "This isn't like her," Mia finally said. Jason's jaw tightened. He stood and grabbed a larger flashlight from his backpack. "Fine. Let's look for her." They ventured into the forest, calling Lauren's name. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming grotesque shapes against the starless sky. Mia's flashlight began to flicker, the beam sputtering like a dying heartbeat. "Come on," she muttered, shaking it. The light steadied. Jason stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" Mia listened. A faint noise drifted through the trees, soft and melodic. It sounded like humming. "Lauren," Mia called. The humming continued, growing louder as they approached. It was an eerie, discordant tune, the kind that made the hairs on Mia's arms stand on end. The sound led them to a clearing. In the center stood Lauren. Her back was to them, her body rigid. She was humming the strange melody her voice flat and unnatural. "Lauren?" Jason said, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. Her head tilted slightly, as though listening to something only she could hear. "Lauren, answer me!" Jason's voice cracked with frustration. Lauren's humming stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. Slowly, she turned to face them. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with a terror that froze Mia in place. "We have to leave," Lauren whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "It's here." "What's here?" Jason asked, taking another step forward. Lauren didn't answer. Instead, she raised a trembling hand and pointed behind them. Mia and Jason turned, their flashlights sweeping the trees. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a shadow moved. It wasn't the movement of an animal or a person. It was fluid, unnatural, a slithering mass that defied logic. Mia's chest tightened. "Run!" They didn't hesitate. The three of them bolted through the forest, the shadow pursuing them. It moved silently, its presence marked only by the crushing sense of dread that grew with each passing second. When they reached the campsite, Jason grabbed the car keys. "Get in," he shouted. They piled into the car, slamming the doors shut. Jason fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, before finally starting the engine. The headlights illuminated the forest ahead, but the shadow was gone. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was their ragged breathing. "What was that?" Mia whispered. Lauren didn't answer. She stared straight ahead, her hands clutching her knees. Finally, she spoke, her voice a hollow echo. "It doesn't let you leave." The engine sputtered and died. The headlights flickered, then went out, plunging them into darkness.